meeting places. The Bible is the story of God finding new creative ways to meet us where we are. And we've been following that through the story of Israel. And as we've been following the story of Israel, we've seen how God meets us in ordinary places and God meets us in hard and difficult places. That's what we've sort of covered so far over this series. And the next place that God meets with his people in the story of Israel is the temple. And this is 400 years after the tabernacle. We just skipped 400 years from last week to today, the temple. And so Israel, they're living in the promised land. Everything's going good. Life is good. They have a new king, King Solomon. And King Solomon builds this majestic new building on one of the main hills of the city of Jerusalem, which is the capital of this new nation of Israel. And that's where he builds this new meeting place, the temple. And this temple, this is supposed to be like God's permanent resting place forever, right? This was his plan all along, wasn't it? Right? We've been seeing this, how God wants to make a place where he can rest and meet with his people forever. And so the story of the Bible could end right here, right? The building is built. He has a whole nation surrounding him. They can meet with him wherever they want. The Bible could end right here. This was his plan all along. But then things start to go downhill all over again. Because Israel forgets something. They forget that very important condition that God gave to them in order for him to live with them. Do you remember this? What the condition was? We looked at it last week. Make room. You got to make room for me in your camp as you're going through the desert. You got to make room for me in your life. And so the Israelites, they made room for him in a building. They made room for him in a building on a hill. They made room for him in a building on a hill in their city, and that was about it. They didn't make room for him in their hearts and in their homes and in their lives. And so they thought that, as long as the economy is good, and as long as the king is getting the job done, even though he's a terrible guy, we're going to be fine. We're going to be fine because this is God's country. God lives here. He's not going anywhere. Interesting. And so they stopped using the temple as a meeting place to meet with God, and they started using it pretty much as a rubber stamp on the life that they wanted to live. Right? God's not going anywhere. This is the end of the story. Happily ever after. I can live the life I want to now. And so because they didn't make room for God in their hearts and in their homes, God left his home. That's what happens in the temple. That's not the temple we're talking about today, by the way. That's not the temple we're talking about today. The Babylonian Empire came and destroyed Solomon's temple. And he took all of the people into exile. That meeting place is gone. It is in ruins. God's presence isn't there anymore. And so that's really the big question this morning. Where do they meet with God now? Where do they meet with God after the temple has been destroyed? When the promised land is literally ripped away from them. When the promise of Abraham is lost, right? When the dynasty of King David is dead, right? This dynasty is supposed to last forever. Now all the kings are dead. When the last, most stable, best meeting place they have ever had to meet with God is in ruins. Where do we meet with God now? Where's the meeting place? Where's he going to find us? That is Ezekiel's story. Ezekiel is in a broken place. He's not in an ordinary place. He's not in a hard place. It is kind of difficult, but he's in a place of defeat. That's how Ezekiel's story starts. He's a young guy. He's about my age. He's like 30 years old. And when his story starts in 1 Ezekiel 1, 5 years have passed. He's been in exile for 5 years. He was part of the first group of exiles that was taken over to Babylon as prisoners. And so he's literally like at the lowest place of his life. This is the lowest he has ever been his entire life. But then all of a sudden, as he's sitting in this refugee camp at the edge of this river in this strange foreign land he's never been to before, he's a prisoner, God meets with him. Ezekiel has this vision. He sees this dark cloud, which should ring so many bells from all the stories we've been reading over the past few weeks, right? God hides his glory in a cloud. He sees this dark thunder cloud coming from the direction of Israel, the direction of the temple. And Ezekiel's first reaction is, and it would be ours too, we'd be like, Lord, what are you doing here? What are you doing here in my predicament? Why are you here? You're supposed to be way far away back in the temple. You're supposed to be in Jerusalem. That's where you live. And over time, over this series of visions, Ezekiel finds out that the temple has been destroyed. That's the bad news. God has moved out of his house. But what's the good news? Where does God go immediately after the temple? God goes to Ezekiel. God goes into exile. God becomes a refugee. God goes in to the broken places. And so when one meeting place is destroyed, God is already on his way to the next one. When Ezekiel literally cannot imagine a way out of this, God comes to show him that he can. And that's what the book of Ezekiel is. It's this series of visions of what God is going to do. And so even as the physical temple is being destroyed, like right now as we speak, Ezekiel, and even as, you have no place, you're in this defeated place and you have no hope right now, I'm going to share a vision of hope with you right now. I'm going to show you a new temple, a new meeting place, and a new life. And so we see a portion of that vision in Ezekiel 47, 1 through 12. The man brought me back to the entrance to the temple. This is Ezekiel speaking. And I saw water coming from out from under the threshold of the temple toward the east, for the temple faced east. The water was coming down from under the south side of the temple, south of the altar. He then brought me out through the north gate and led me around the outside to the outer gate facing east, and the water was trickling from the south side. As the man went eastward with a measuring line in his hand, he measured off 1,000 cubits. It's about a third of a mile. And then he led me through water that was ankle deep. He measured off another 1,000 cubits, and he led me through water that was knee deep. He measured off another 1,000, and he led me through water that was up to the waist. He measured off another 1,000, but now it was a river that I could not cross, because the water had risen and was deep enough to swim in, a river that no one could cross. He asked me, "Son of man, do you see this?" Then he led me back to the bank of the river. When I arrived there, I saw a great number of trees on each side of the river. He said to me, "This water flows toward the eastern region and goes down into the Arabah, where it enters the Dead Sea. When it empties into the Dead Sea, the salty water there becomes fresh. Swarms of living creatures will live wherever the river flows. There will be large numbers of fish, because this water flows there and makes the salt water fresh. So where the river flows, everything will live. Fishermen will stand along the shore of the Dead Sea, from En-Gedi to En-Glaim. There will be places for spreading nets. The fish will be of many kinds, like the fish of the Mediterranean Sea. But the swamps and marshes will not become fresh. They will be left for salt. Fruit trees of all kinds will grow on both banks of the river. Their leaves will not wither, nor will their fruit fail. Every month they will bear fruit, because the water from the sanctuary flows to them. Their fruit will serve for food, and their leaves for healing." And so we see again, just like we've seen every week so far in this series, God is starting a new building project. God is starting a new building project where he can live near his people again and give them life. And that's really the thrust of all of Ezekiel's visions. The whole book points to the fact that the only way out of broken places, where he's in right now, is God's presence. His presence is the key to life. And so Ezekiel has this tour guide, right? The man is showing him around. He's just this random guy that has this measuring line and a measuring tool, and he's taking Ezekiel around as a tour guide to show sort of the dimensions of God's new house. And before they start, right, we just read from chapter 47. Back when the tour starts in chapter 40, the tour guide, this random guy who's measuring everything for him, he tells Ezekiel this. This is chapter 40. He says, "Look carefully, Ezekiel. Listen closely and pay attention to everything I am about to show you, because this is the reason I brought you here." So this is really important. We have to be paying very careful attention to what he's seeing. And near the end of the tour, which is where we just read, Ezekiel sees this little trickle of water. We didn't read all the stuff talking about how tall the walls were and where the gates were. We didn't look at that. He's just gotten done with that part. And then they go back inside, and he sees this little trickle of water coming out of the temple's entrance, the way that you would go meet with God. And it turns into a stream, and then it turns into a deep river. Now, what is that all about? Seems kind of like a weird vision. And sometimes I think we make it harder than it actually is to understand what God's trying to show us. Because look what's happening in this passage. God is using the terrain that Ezekiel is familiar with to give him hope. Now, it doesn't make a lot of sense yet. It's kind of weird, but he's using the terrain he's familiar with so he can get down to his level. And so God uses our geography. He uses our place in the world to reach us where we are. And so, God uses a different vocabulary with Ezekiel, right? But he always uses the terrain that you are familiar with to reach you. And your job is to pay attention and watch for that during the week. But this morning, we want to understand what's so important about this vision. What's so important about the way God describes Ezekiel's geography, right? What's all this? Why is the water? Why is this so important? Where the water's flowing, what it looks like, and we want to see how he might be doing the same thing in our lives as well. And so the first thing that we should notice is from this vision is that from the very beginning, it is full of inaccuracies. This is so unrealistic. So, for example, there is no spring on the Temple Mount. The hill that the temple was built on, right? There's Solomon's temple, and then there's Herod's temple that was built on that, and now it's ruins today. That hill, there's no spring on that. There's no source of fresh water on that hill. Makes no sense. Now, there are many other smaller springs around and in Jerusalem, but most of the water came from reservoirs and cisterns. So this is totally unrealistic. There's no springs on the Temple Mount. This makes no sense. And I don't know about you, but an unrealistic vision of hope, that doesn't really help me, right? I wouldn't want that from God. So, for example, if I'm struggling with depression, and God starts off, but he wants to give me hope, and he starts off by showing me a vision of getting a full night's sleep. Yeah, right. If I'm struggling in my marriage, and God starts off, he wants to give me hope, and he starts off by showing me a vision of going on a nice date that doesn't end in a fight, no, I'm not going to believe that. That's so unrealistic, God. But that's what God does with Ezekiel. He doesn't just end big. He starts big. He starts unrealistically, and then it just gets even more, it just gets bigger and bigger, and it builds up, and it's just so unrealistic. But the tour guide says, Ezekiel, are you watching this closely? I don't need you to do anything big right now. I don't need you to take any big steps. I don't need you to work on anything. I just need you to see this big thing that I'm doing. I just need you to see it. This is why I brought you here. Watch closely. And so he's not really daring Ezekiel to do anything other than watch. He's saying, I dare you, Ezekiel, in this broken place that you're in right now, I dare you to imagine this with me. I dare you. And so Ezekiel follows the water, and then things get really weird, right? He circles, so it's coming down it's heading down the southeast side of the hill. So he has to come up through the north and swing around to the back of the temple. And so he sees the water turning east. It's south down the hill first, and then it kind of cuts back east. And it's heading towards the Jordan River. And every third of a mile, they step in to see how deep it is. And within about a mile, well, first of all, he notices right away, and we notice too, that it's picking up size and speed, right? You're getting a trickle, a stream, a river that's so deep you can't even cross. So he's noticing this. And pretty much within 1 mile, still several miles away from the nearest river, which is the Jordan River, it's on its way there. It's not even close to the Jordan River yet. This trickle becomes a river you can't even cross within a mile. And that's why he says, Son of man, are you seeing this? This is incredible. Are you seeing this? And we're like, yeah, I'm seeing this. And it doesn't make any sense. This doesn't make any sense. This is not how a river is made, right? 2 plus 2 equals 4, right? You don't. It's not 1 plus 0 equals 4. This is basic math, God. You don't get a river out of a trickle, right? You need multiple sources. You need tributaries feeding into it. That's how the Jordan River, that's how every river works. You need multiple sources of water to build something this big. And so, by the way, water is important. I should have mentioned this. Water is very important in the Old Testament. You can't have life in the desert without water. And that's why it was a very common metaphor for blessings or life in the Old Testament. And Ezekiel would have understood that. And so when he's saying, hey, the tour guide's like, hey, are you reading this? Do you see what's going on here? And Ezekiel's like, yeah, I think I do, right? I'm seeing that this life-giving water, this river, is going out into the desert. And I'm seeing that the blessings, the life, doesn't come from anywhere other than one single source, God's presence in the temple. That's where all of this starts. And I'm seeing that the further it goes downhill, the stronger it gets. The further it goes downhill, the stronger it gets. And I'm starting to see that even when this doesn't add up, even when things don't add up and don't make any sense, Lord, you're the only way out of this. Your presence in my life is the only way out of this. And so the tour guide says, you haven't seen anything yet. We've just gone a mile. It continues like this. And it gets bigger and better. It continues like this. It keeps going like this down into the Arabah, which is the Jordan River Valley. We're just supposed to know that, I guess. The Arabah, the Jordan River Valley. And it pours into the Dead Sea. And so that's kind of how the Jordan River works. It starts way up in the north. It flows south into the Sea of Galilee. Then it flows south again down into the Dead Sea. And he says it's going to fill that up. It's going to fill that up. And it's going to push its way all the way through the desert to the ocean. So not only is it going to make it to the Dead Sea, it's going to push through the desert several miles to get to the ocean. That doesn't exist today. There's no path. There's no water that goes that way. And so I still think we don't understand fully how much God is stretching Ezekiel's imagination. So for instance, okay, they call it the Dead Sea for a reason. It is dead. Okay, so this is going to blow your mind. So the oceans, the Pacific, the Atlantic. Help me out. I know two. The Indian. What? Is that one? The oceans, okay? I'm a pastor, okay? The oceans have a mineral content. I know this part. They have a mineral content of about 3.5%. That's salt water. Have you ever had salt water in your mouth? Have you experienced salt water? It's not fun to drink. It's very salty. That's 3.5%. The Dead Sea has a mineral content of 26 to 35%. That's why when you swim in it, you've seen pictures, or maybe you've even been there, when you go into the water, you float without even trying. It's crazy. If you get Dead Sea water on your lips, it burns. If you get it in your mouth, ouch. If you get it in your eyes, you're dead. It's awful. Don't get it in your eyes. There is no life in that water. There is no life in that lake. And when I was there and we were driving to like the hotel we were going to stay at, because that's the only industry there is tourism. There's no life there. There's no fishing. There's salt and tourism. That's it. But as we were driving down the road along the shore to the hotel, I thought I was seeing whitecaps in the water, which I'm kind of slow. You'll learn this about me if you get to know me. I kind of have those brain things once in a while. And I'm like, wait, there's no wind. Something's not adding up, right? It wasn't whitecaps. It was mineral deposits sticking out of the water. That's how dead it is. And so, like I said, the only industry there is tourism and salt. It's like you can come here to look at it, and you can use some salt. They make some beauty products out of it. Otherwise, this place is completely dead, even today. But God says, one little trickle from my new temple, my presence, this temple that I'm going to build, can turn the deadest places on earth into places of life. Do you see this, Ezekiel? But there's more. There's more. The Dead Sea is 1,296 feet below sea level. It's lower than the level of the ocean. So that means two things. One, it is the lowest point on earth. It is literally the lowest place that you can go on land on planet Earth. Two, that means that this Dead Sea, this water, has no outlet. The Dead Sea is a dead end. it is a dead end. The water flows in, and it brings in about 7 million tons of minerals per day, and then it has nowhere to go. So the minerals stay, and they turn into what looks like whitecaps, and they fool the people that are coming there on the bus, and the water evaporates. And that's just what happens. That's why the sea is so dead. There's no outlet. It's so low, there's no outlet. But God says, listen, are you seeing this? Watch this, Ezekiel. I'm going to push this river. I'm going to make this trickle flow, and I'm going to push it all the way to the ocean. I'm going to turn a dead end into a way out. I'm going to go to the deepest place, literally the deepest place you will ever be able to find yourself on planet Earth. And I'm going to fill it so full of life that you're going to be in over your head with it. Ezekiel, are you seeing this? Are you seeing this? Are you seeing this? The Dead Sea might not be part of your geography. It's not, right? We don't live there. It's not part of our geography. But we still know what the lowest place on earth feels like. We've all been there in some shape or form. We all know what it feels like to have all this sediment building up in our lives with nowhere to go. And it's causing these blockages, and it's causing this, and pretty soon it becomes toxic, and there's no life. We know what it feels like when the water dries up. That life dries up, and there's no way out. We're at a dead end. The ordinary places, we talked about that 2 weeks ago. God finds us in ordinary places. The ordinary places turned into hard places, right, like the desert, but then the hard place is won. That's where Ezekiel is right now. The hard places that I was in, God left, whatever happened, I'm in a broken place. That's where I am right now. The depression won. I'm not struggling with it. It won. The anxiety always comes out on top. I've never beat it once. The addiction keeps getting the best of me. I maybe had like 1 or 2 times where I was able to fight it, but it just came the next day. The addiction always comes out on top. And you know what? Church, the temple that we kind of think of today, we got to come to this place to meet with God, which is incorrect, by the way. The church might as well be rubble, as far as I'm concerned. I can't come to church. I can't come back here. God's not here. And so while everything might look fine from the road, as you're passing by, as you're looking at your house, but inside it is ruins. Everything looks fine from the road, but inside there's ruins. And that's where we get to a point where we're at Ezekiel's point, and we're like, I cannot imagine a single way out of this. I just can't. Ezekiel's in the same place. We might be in the same place. But God is also in the same place. That's where he meets us. And what does God say in that place? Look carefully, listen closely, pay attention. Because you can't imagine a way out. I know you can't. You cannot imagine a way out. But I can. And I'm going to come here to show you what I'm planning. You think you're alone in exile. You're not. You think that this is the end of the story. It's not. Because even if you're at the lowest place in your life, the lowest place of your existence, the more you let my presence flow into the low places in your life, the broken places in your life, the stronger I get, the more powerful I can become in your life. You cannot sink low enough for me not to find you. The deeper you are, the deeper I go. That's just how this works. This is how I work. You cannot sink low enough for me not to find you. And it might start like a trickle, right? It might seem like it's not much, but it ends in a river that you cannot even cross. And so God is essentially saying, hey, Ezekiel, if I can bring life to literally the lowest, deadest place on planet Earth, what makes you think that I cannot bring life to the lowest, deadest place that you are in or that is inside of you? I can change the entire landscape of your life. And so I don't know where you are this morning. I don't know. I'm not God. I have no idea where you're at. Everything looks fine from the road as I'm driving by your house. But inside, there might be some ruins. I don't know. I don't know where you're at. But I dare you. I dare you to imagine going fishing on the Dead Sea. Now, whatever that might look like in your life, I dare you to imagine fishing I dare you to imagine finding life and finding God where there didn't used to be, where you never thought you'd see him again. I dare you to imagine a paradise in the desert. Whatever you're in the middle of right now, whatever you're at the bottom of, whatever broken place you are in, God is not asking you, he's not challenging you, he's not telling you to dig your way out. He's not asking you to really do anything. You're stuck. He's daring you to hope again. Hope again. He's daring you to imagine all the ways that he is already on his way to find you and get you out. And he's asking you to pay attention and get ready. Now, I realize that the practical application here seems kind of stupid, because what I'm essentially asking you to do is get your fishing poles ready and let's head out into the desert. I realize how stupid that would look to do something like that. And my guess is sometimes that's what your faith feels like, right? You feel like a total idiot. You're like in the middle of a desert and you've got a fishing pole and you're like, yeah, the water's coming sometime. And everyone's like, okay. You might even feel like that when you come here. You haven't seen God here in a while. You haven't seen him anywhere in a while. And you're like, I'm going to bring my fishing pole to church this week. And I'm going to cast out a line. And I'm going to expect him to bite. And then all you get is dust. Maybe you're in a place like that. I don't know. He's not here. Okay, I tried at church. Maybe if I try over here. Maybe if I try this friend group. Maybe if I try a new place. Maybe he's over here. And pretty soon, we lose hope. And we're like, this is so unrealistic. The promises of God, it's so unrealistic. The water isn't coming. God's not here. That's a place that Ezekiel's in. But I encourage you to read this passage when you get home this week. Study it. Look at it. Are you watching this? Are you seeing this? Watch closely. Listen. Pay attention. God is not going to give, I'll settle this right now. God is not going to give you the same vision he gave Ezekiel. Remember, right? But he's going to show you something, right? He's going to use the geography around you. He's already put people in your life who can see what God sees in you, but you can't yet. God uses people. Listen to them. He's already given you opportunities to meet with him. And that doesn't just mean invitations to church. I'm not saying that. You can meet with God anywhere. He's trying to meet with you. Take that opportunity. Take that opportunity. He's already shown you what life could be like. He shows it in his word. He shows it in other places. He's shown you what life could be like if you just move closer to him. All you have to do is follow him. Follow him. Wait for him to come to you and get closer to him. Now, wherever you think you are, okay, no matter how unrealistic this sounds, ask him to come to you. Invite him into your life. Ask for his presence to come close to you and be with you. And you will find out for yourself, he is already on his way. He's already on his way to find you. Pray with me. Heavenly Father, we thank you for your word. We'd be lost without it because we go from one day to the next wondering if you're really here. But now we know, Lord, just like Ezekiel knew, that you find us in broken places. When we go into exile, you're right behind us. And the deeper you go into the low places, Lord, the stronger you get, the deeper the water goes. Help us to call on your name together, God with us, Emmanuel, and see that even when we can't imagine a way out of the places we're in right now, you can. And right now, Lord, you are coming to fill us up with so much life that we are in over our heads. It's in Jesus' name we pray. Amen.